Yo, Joe. Talking comics, here's your host. It's A Real American Brian.
And we're back to dive into some more G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero. And we'll be getting into issue number 11. This is the introduction of the 1989 line of the G.I. Joes. Bob Camp provides the cover, and we get our first look at Doc and Snowjob on the Battle Bear. First panel of the book, we get first appearances of Wild Bill, Doc, and Snowjob. They are in a helicopter over Alaska, being taken to the G.I. Joe team. We get a glimpse of a Cobra Hiss tank as Wild Bill looks for a place to put the copter down. The pipeline ploy has begun. Hawk, Snake Eyes, and Breaker lay down some fire to keep the Cobras at bay so Wild Bill can land safely. Doc gets straight to work treating the wounded Joes. Gung Ho joins the fight in his first appearance. Rock and Roll isn't too fond of Gung Ho and mentions to Hawk he is running around with his shirt open so that everyone can see his core tattoo. He has a point, as we see Gung Ho laying down in the snow with his vest open. Hawk lets the new recruits know that they have been out there for weeks and have taken out several of the Cobra tanks, but have lost their heavy stuff in the process. It isn't clear what Cobra wants with the oil pipeline. The two remaining Cobra tanks took off following the pipeline. They left a fire team behind, but they follow the tank's path as well. The Joes pile into the Battle Bear and abandon his tank with no weapon system. As the Joes follow the pipeline, they begin getting to know each other. Snowjob begins telling Rock and Roll about Gung Ho's hot sister. Doc tries to get to know Snake Eyes and check out his wounds. He attempts to lift his mask and he is abruptly stopped by Snake Eyes. And we are told nobody ever takes Snake Eyes' mask off. Which is fine. I don't need another panel of someone grossed out by his face. Cobra Command is still operating from Springfield. Baroness and Cobra Commander are discussing the Joes finding their pipeline activity. Cobra Commander has brought in a specialist to be his new field commander. We get our shadowy cameo appearance of Destro. Cobra Commander begins to introduce him to Baroness, and she stops him and says, "We have met." Snowjob has spotted the Cobras they are tracking, and they have stopped at a pumping station along the pipeline. The Cobras begin unloading some heavy-duty canisters, and one of the tanks takes off with most of the infantry. Rock and Roll proposes they split up, but Gung Ho says that would be a bad idea. They should take out the Cobras at the pumping station, take their tank, and go after the rest. Snake Eyes and Hawk agree with his plan, only making Rock and Roll like Gung Ho less. Destro is on the ground in Alaska and leading the force to the main objective. The Cobras are being very careful with the canisters they unloaded earlier when Rock and Roll comes busting through the door. The canisters are broken open in the firefight, and one of the Cobras tells the Joes it is a plague toxin, and that they only have 6 hours to live. The only antidote just left with the specialist and his tank. One of the Cobra infantry doubled back with an RPG and took out the damaged Hiss the Joes came in on, then unloaded and took out the second Hiss they had left behind. The Joes get the Battle Bear under cover to protect it. The Cobras got some of the plague toxin into the pipeline. Once the Joes have the Battle Bear safe, they radio to Breaker and tell him about the contaminated oil flow, hoping that Wild Bill can fly down to the next pump station and stop it. Snowjob, Doc, and Snake Eyes take the Battle Bear to track down the remaining tank before their 6 hours are up. Wild Bill gets the message and takes Airborne with him to the pump station to stop the contamination. The Joes wait for the Cobra RPG to fire again, then take off as he is reloading. As the Joes get the Battle Bear up the hill to the RPG, Snake Eyes reaches down and grabs the weapon from the Cobra infantrymen. They continue on without the slightest pause. Gung Ho says getting out is one thing, getting back will be the real challenge. Hawk responds, "That is why I sent Snake Eyes. He always makes it back." Breaker calls back to General Flag requesting reinforcements in a quarantine zone. Flag grants them the reinforcements, but they don't have enough personnel in the area for a quarantine zone. Cobra has tapped into the radio signal and heard the whole exchange. The Joes follow the tank tracks back to a nuclear power plant. When they get there, they are told Cobra came through and took enough plutonium to start World War III. The Joes continue trying to track them down. As Wild Bill is flying over, headed to the pump station, he sees the Joes on the Battle Bear have company. Some Cobra hang gliders are firing at them. Airborne jumps out to even up the odds, and here's our first appearance of Airborne. Snake Eyes on the ground helps Airborne out by shooting the RPG at the hang gliders. A bit overkill, but he gets them lined up so he takes a couple out with one shot. Airborne hops on the Battle Bear with the other Joes and introduces himself. Hawk, Gung Ho, and Rock and Roll see Joe copters coming in and think they are saved, but Hawk tells them Cobra has tricked them. The Cobra infantry had a surface-to-air missile hidden and are ready to take out the Joe copters. They don't stand a chance, until Gung Ho charges out of the pump station to take on the Cobras alone. He handles them without much of a problem. Wild Bill and Zap have made it to Pumping Station 2, and the oil company employees are there to stop the flow. Destro, the specialist, reports back to Cobra Commander that he is prepared to execute the final part of the plan. The Joes at Pump Station 1 have rounded up the Cobra infantry. Rock and Roll is impressed with Gung Ho's work. Rock and Roll says if Snake Eyes makes it back with the antidote and they live, maybe Gung Ho could set him up with his sister. Gung Ho is not too pleased with this and lets him know that his sister is 9 years old. The oil workers put a probe into the pipeline that has some radioactive material in it. They are told it is to help track the contamination. The Joes on the Battle Bear notice that the tank tracks go into a shed. They realize that whoever Wild Bill is talking to probably isn't on their side. The Joes put together that the stolen plutonium is in the probe being sent down the pipeline. Zap busts in and tells Wild Bill that the men are Cobras. The Cobra troopers think they have outdrawn the Joes, but Wild Bill will not be outdrawn. The specialist tells the Joes the plague toxin was a ruse to distract them. The plutonium is halfway to Pump Station 3 by now, where a Cobra copter is waiting to take it away. The plague toxin is real, and he has the only antidote. Doc won't fire a weapon, but he throws a snowball and attempts to take down the specialist, but is thrown from the shadows. The Joes fire into the shadows after the specialist. Snake Eyes breaks into the shed. The last Cobra his tank explodes. Destro sneaks out a window and attempts to use his wrist missile to blow up the Battle Bear, but it is a dud. Hope he figures that one out pretty soon. I mean, it's not a good look for a weapons dealer. Doc reveals that he snatched the antidote from Destro in the fight. The Joes still have to stop the plutonium in the pipeline and get the antidote back to their friends. At Pump Station 2, Doc tells the Cobra troopers that they released the toxin into the pipeline and all the Cobra troopers are infected. He will trade them the antidote for the plutonium. They take the trade without question. Back at the Joe base camp, Doc lines the Joes up to get the real antidote. He traded the Cobra's tetanus boosters. They never put the toxin in the pipeline to begin with. The Joes outsmarted them. Rock and Roll confronts Snowjob, questioning him on the stories he told him about Gung Ho's sister. Doc chimes in that his next move was to ask for $20 to set up the date. And that is why they call him Snowjob. Ha ha ha. And that is issue 11. We got a couple of bonus pages of story in this one. Met a lot of new Joes and got a peek, but not a full reveal of the specialist. Pretty fun Alaskan adventure. The Cobra is one step ahead of the Joes until the very end when the Joes outwitted them. My favorite panel from this issue is here. Rock and Roll and Gung Ho talking about my sister is 9. Such a funny moment. Just as the characters seem to be finding some common ground, they are ready to come to blows. This was a pretty great story, and the first real expansion of the cast, thanks to the new toys coming out. I'm going to give this issue 4 flag points. That is issue 11. Knowing is half the battle, and now you know. Subscribe so you don't miss out on the next video where we dive into issue 12.
So long from Brian. Until next time, same Brian time, same Brian channel.